It looks like trying to join us, but since it's been about 10 minutes, I want to go ahead and welcome you all here. Thank you so much for being here tonight for this, our very first chamber music chat, or summer evening chamber music chat. We may very well have more in the future. But I'm so glad that you were able to join us tonight and to have time to sit and watch the concert today. We're really excited to be able to offer these kind of opportunities for you guys and just get to see your faces, even if we can't see you in person quite yet. So thank you so much for being here and for being such amazing friends and patrons, but more importantly, friends. So Sam, before we get started, I have a few questions already for you about chamber music, it looks like. Do you have anything that you'd like to start with?
Well, I'll just say that I thought these performances were splendid. I mean, they were so clean. The ensemble is so good. The musicians are on the same wavelength in each of the performances. It's clear that these people really know each other and they really know how each other play. And it also felt very confident without feeling businesslike. Sometimes, there's people who do the same thing a lot of the time extremely well and very efficiently. Sometimes that's not an asset in music, but these performances felt very in the moment and very genuine, at the same time very settled, very, very, coming from all the right places. And in that sense, anybody who had not heard these pieces before got a really good chance to experience them.
And it was a wonderful opportunity to do that. Well, we can talk a little bit just about chamber music in general, Sam. A lot of chamber music involves piano, okay? But piano plays a different part, different roles in different chamber music experiences, right? At different times. So I want to talk about this program in particular. How does that illustrate some of these different roles for piano and chamber music?
Okay. Well, in this program, we had one work with piano, but in that single work in the Brahms trio, there's plenty of illustrations of how the piano has a different sort of function, if you will, in chamber music than many other instruments, and they're all equally valid, and yet they all serve very different purposes, particularly expressively. The best thing about the piano, of course, is its range. It has a tremendous range. So very, very low notes, very, very high notes, and everything in between, it's all there. And the piano has the great advantage of being able to strike 2 notes or more at the same time, 10, sometimes 15, if you're playing like this. And it creates harmony. And harmony, of course, is the basis of so much of Western music. It's not all. There's chant, of course, but we hear chant at Spivey Hall, but chamber music is mostly about, it's polyphonic, but it's also based in harmonies. So if you remember the opening of this Brahms trio, where Michael Brown is just, I mean, it's this gigantic chordal structure, and he's making this big pronouncement. And to me, that is symphonic Brahms. This sounds like he's trying to write another symphony in C minor, and it became chamber music instead. So that's where the piano is taking a leading role, simply because it has all the notes. Everything that the cello and the violin were doing, all those tones, all those pitches were already in the piano part. But the piano by itself would not sound the same in this work if it didn't have those strings going along with it. So it's a sense of the fullness and the richness and the harmonic impetus that the piano has. At the same time, it's in a leading role. In other words, at that moment, the piano is really leading the performance, because you hear so much the sound, and all of the harmonic meaning is contained in the piano sound. But then, seconds later, the piano is in a dialogue. It will echo. It will have a sort of call and response relationship with one of the instruments. Like there will be a theme in the violin that the piano picks up, and then it shows up in a lower register with the cello. So in that sense, the piano is being one of what I would call a very good democratic participant in the chamber music performance. chamber music is a lot about dialogue, a lot about give and take. And I think the people who love chamber music deeply really prize those qualities. When the players are so attuned to each other and the piece is unfolding, the nuances that are involved in those give and takes, it's like having a conversation with a really good friend. So, you know, there's the piano being a good soldier, but also still combining. You know, there's so much gluten-free in these days, you know, in our foods, but there's a lot of gluten in piano writing. It pulls stuff together. It holds it together. And that way you have, you know, it's not just the ingredients, but you see everything being pulled together. The piano can also be very percussive. In the Mozart, we heard, you know, pizzicato, you know, and Tara thought, you know, how beautiful that was to have the strings pizzicato, and she could play these lovely tunes. Well, the piano can imitate pizzicato. It can imitate short and dry, but it also can be almost like a percussion instrument itself. So it has this ability to strike and to have impacts and accents. All the instruments do, but the piano is a very powerful instrument in that sense. So in a sense, it's also a very rhythmic instrument. It has pulse because of its command of the harmonic life of the piece, but it also has many different textures. So if you were painting a picture, you could look at the palette of the piano and you wouldn't have 64 crayons, you wouldn't have 124 crayons, you'd have 360 crayons, you know, and other instruments have many, many colors and textures, but the piano is particularly well endowed with those. So, I mean, I'm always wondering, you know, what in chamber music, who's leading? Who has the idea? Where are the ideas going? What's happening to the ideas? And when is someone in the foreground and when is someone slightly in the background? And that ebb and flow is some of the most beautiful expression of music in chamber. And I'm sorry to bump I was playing my piano and I bumped my screen. I promise not to do that.
That's all right. Thanks, Sam. Since everybody's here, we do have such a small group today. I want to encourage you, if you have any particular questions, you know, just let us know. You can kind of raise your hand. If there's something you'd like to ask. Does anybody have anything from today or about chamber music in general that you would like to ask Sam? I have another question if nobody is ready with the question yet. For this next question, it's going to be your turn, okay? All right, Tom, let's do it.
Oh, I guess any more word about next season, Sam?
Oh, okay. He's getting right down to brass tacks.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to be so happy to hear live music. I think I'll cry through the entire performance. I swear.
I know that feeling.
I think maybe we could make a small fortune in having Spivey logo towels. You know, you can just sort of lean in and it's like, oh my gosh, here it is again.
Right.
Well, Tom, many people have heard me say this. Dr. Hines, the president of Clayton State, my boss, has a saying. He says, the virus is in charge and it does not send memos. So we are still, as you know, from the number of infections that were reported just recently on Friday, you know, something in the total of 4,800 in a single day, I believe it was. We are still in the midst of a pandemic that we as a nation seem to be spectacularly unsuccessful in controlling, which is unfortunate, and I'll just leave it at that. I wish our society could do it better. I wish our government could do it better. I wish our governments, plural, could do it better. But until such time as we can return safely, we're not going to be able to offer artists on stage to you. It proves to be extremely difficult to do. And I want to observe to you that the Salzburg Festival which is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year, planned an enormously elaborate and extravagant season. And they postponed or canceled much of it, but they have found a way to go forward. And the way that they are going forward and the amount of labor and time and expense that it takes to do group events with musicians, including opera performances, safely, it's staggering, and it's also extremely expensive. And it's still introduces the elements of risk. And I come from a position in which I believe that I just don't feel right. I think it's morally wrong for us to create events where people might, if they attended, be subjected to a level of risk that could make them sick or worse. And therefore, you know, I'm still back to my major premise. No concert is worth anyone's life. So the science hasn't changed much. We understand the science a little bit better now, but the virus is still intent on replicating, and that's its job. And until we know how to deal with that better, my position is still the same. At the same time, I'll tell you that all the artists are being extremely cooperative, and they're very much wanting to know what we're thinking, and I'm wanting to know what they're thinking, and we're having lots of dialogue. For chamber music fans, I'll tell you that I have commissioned a new program that we will be streaming from Spivey Hall this fall. And I'll tell you more about the details when I'm absolutely sure it's happening, but it's going to come from a string quartet. It's going to be uniquely for Spivey Hall, and it will be devoted to Spivey audiences. So this is a way that we're going to keep our connection with the artists and the music that we love, and we'll be able to experience it from our website, and we'll be able to augment the experience by meeting with people afterwards online, until such time that we can do other things that leave us, you know, in better health after we've come to a concert and not worrying so much about risk. You know, there are a few things that I've rescheduled a lot of things from this season to next season already. So this news of the possibility of you know, an effective virus being available by, you know, millions of doses is sort of like, that's very exciting, but we can't get too excited yet because we don't know if any of them are going to work. So you know, I'm eager. I'm looking. I can't wait for the day then we're back. But right now, we're not going to do anything from the stage that an audience member can attend through December. And we don't know yet about January, February, March, April, May. We know we will have programming online if there is no other programming possible, but it all remains to be seen. And of course, right now, many people can come and go from the United States, and there's not so many flights, and you can't get a visa right now. It's going to take months for some people to get visas. So there's, you know, and there's only so much Lysol in the world. There's only so much isopropyl alcohol in the world, and there's more of it now than there was for a while. Tammy found some Lysol for us at a dollar store, and concentrated Lysol. And she bought bottles for all of us, and I said, "Yay, Tammy!" Back we had you know, this is like comfort and safety and money in the bank. We've got Lysol, you know, but you know, we want to get there, Tom. We all want to get there, and I can guarantee you that within 3 weeks of it being possible, we'll be able to switch on and go that way.
Wow.
But we're only gonna do it when we know that the risk is much lower, and we are surveying our patrons. Some of you have participated in these surveys. We're doing a longitudinal study of how people think. People over the country, all over the world are doing this right now. So yeah, we're taking our cues from you as well. It's like, how comfortable do you feel coming to a concert? Not many people are going to show up at a concert right now. So, long answer, sorry. You know me, I've got too many words most of the time. Like Mozart and Amadeus, too many notes, you know, but you know, that's the situation. That's the situation.
Sure.
But we are doing our best to come up with some really, really fun opportunities, not just like this, but other streaming opportunities that Sam has talked about a little bit that we're going to be working to bring you guys, okay? So even though we can't get together, we're still going to find some really fun ways to get together and enjoy the music. Yeah. So keep up with our Facebook and all of our social media accounts, but especially YouTube. For example, this presentation today will be on YouTube, as well as I think for a week you can watch the performance from today on the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center site. So you can go watch those, but on our social media pages, we'll give you updates about fun things that we think you would like, as well as these kind of talks that we're going to have after the performances that, you know, that we're choosing to have these chamber music chats afterwards. I think we're going to do 2 more of these chamber music chats. For the Sundays that will have performances, you can watch on social media, and we'll try to send out emails as well on Thursdays. So on the Thursday of the week of the event, you'll know if we're going to be having a chamber music chat that weekend. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Tammy or myself, and share this with your friends. This is what we really would like to do. We want to be able to come in here together and see the ones of you that can be here for the concerts that you love, and chat about what you have thought about it, because we like your insight as well. Obviously Sam has really amazing things to say always about a concert, but I miss talking to you guys in the lobby afterwards. So
I miss that too.
Well, on that very topic, the 2 other concerts that we have coming up are, one of them is next week, and you'll get the invitation on Thursday. It's again at the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, and this features a wonderful program, a cello sonata by Dimignani, a Baroque piece with the continuo, Haydn String Quartet, Opus 50, number 5. It's called The Dream because of this gorgeous, rather short, but very beautifully evocative slow movement, the second movement, that makes you feel like you're sort of in a dreamlike state. It's quite wonderful. And that's going to be performed by the Orion String Quartet, which is a major quartet and came out of the Chamber Music Society. And then we're going to have Copland's Appalachian Spring Suite, and I adore this piece. Oh. I met Copland when I was in college. He came to Dartmouth, and my first time actually hearing that piece was on a CBS recording in which he was leading it, and they also captured some of his comments that he made in rehearsal. And ever since that time, I've been entirely enamored by this piece. And I will confess, I was too shy to go up and talk with him. I was invited to a reception. I went to the reception. I circled him. I went around about 3 or 4 times, and I kept waiting for my moment, and I never quite found it. But I remember how he was, not a tall man, but he was taller than I thought he was going to be. And he had white hair, he had a very pronounced, sharp nose, and he had a smile, a nice, mild smile on his face all the times. But this Appalachian Spring performance features some artists that Spivey people know. The pianist is Gloria Chin from String Theory up in Chattanooga. When we've gone to String Theory, we've always heard Gloria playing there. Arnold Sussman is a violinist we've heard in California. I think it's Spivey Hall. Yes. A violist, Matthew Littman. David Finkel, one of the co-directors of Chamber Music Society, he's in this. He's by far the engine of this, I'm sure. Nick Kanalakis, the young cellist who was just with us with Chamber Music Society in last February. Not this February, but a year ago, February. And then David Schifrin, the wonderful clarinetist. In Appalachian Spring, the clarinet has an incredibly important role. It has this beautiful, ethereal, just vocal-like theme. It starts off, the gift to be simple, the shaker theme. So there's really, really gorgeous writing in this. And with video, you get to see their faces. And that's what I think will make this a really interesting experience. So that is next Sunday, same bat time, same bat channel. And then we'll be back again at the end of this series of 6 concerts. That's on August 16. That performance begins with an aria from a Handel oratorio called Samson. It's called Let the Bright Seraphim. And it's an aria that concludes this opera. And it's the story of Samson and Delilah to a certain degree. And it's sung by the Israelite woman. It is one of the most wonderful and vibrant and, buoyant arias Handel had written. It also features the clarino trumpet that we heard. Same artist will be playing. Mr. Washburn is going to be playing that. So that's short, but it's brilliant to open. Then Orion Weiss, who played with Benjamin Beilman at Spivey Hall, he's coming back in a duo piano configuration with a guy named Hugh Watkins, who is actually a composer as well. They're going to play a Mendelssohn piece for piano 4 hands. And then we get the Franck Quintet in F minor for piano and strings. which is right up there with the Franck sonata that we hear so often on the violin. And if David and Wuhan show up in 2021, we might actually hear them play the Franck sonata, which I hope would happen. We'll see. But that is red meat. That is red meat chamber music, just like the Brahms was red meat chamber music. It's deeply romantic. It has a more of a French approach to composition than a German, but it's incredibly beautiful writing to the piano and a very effective writing for the strings. So we've got those experiences in front of us too.
Sam, I have a question. Turn my video back on. We heard a lot of food analogies tonight, which I really and I also really loved hearing about the personal stories about each musician's instruments and how and how it makes a difference. And do you have any other interesting stories about maybe some of the chamber musicians that have been at Spivey Hall, their instruments?
Wow, now I have to think a bit. Well, of course, the musicians, no, they have their personal histories with their instruments, so they can tell the best stories about these. And that's when at a dinner, after a concert, that's when those stories start to flow generally. I think most of you know the stories of people who have left their instruments in taxis. I mean, Yo-Yo Ma has twice left his cello in the back of a taxi, and it has driven off and gone away. And he's gotten it back both times, which is sort of miraculous. More than a little miraculous. I mean, he is by far one of the best known classical musicians in the world, but taxi drivers don't know that. They just got this great big thing and, what do I do with it? So thankfully, Yo-Yo figured it out pretty quickly that he had left his instrument in a taxi. So that's a relief, but he tells that story on himself fairly often. Because sometimes after a concert, your mind is just, if you're a musician, your mind is other places. You're just, you're thinking so hard and so much, and it's this flood of thoughts, and you're either desperate to get home, or you're waiting to do something, or you're hungry, or you need to go to the bathroom or something, but you're doing it, and then like, oh, where's my cello? I think string players who get to play these incredible, rare Italian-made violins, the Strads and the Guarneri's del Gesù instruments, that is such a privilege. And I also think that's important to note. When Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center is playing, and these people have those instruments, in part because they're A, extremely good at what they do, and B, they get plenty of work, and therefore, and they have high exposure, so banks are willing to fund them now, and people who own these instruments, like foundations, and there's actually investment companies that invest in instruments as an appreciation measure for those who wish to enrich themselves. It's sort of like a collective. It's easier for these fine musicians to get a hold of these very rare instruments. And that contributes enormously to the sound that we hear anywhere, be it on stage or through our speakers. To have a fine violin like Ani had, or like Paul had, that you don't notice it, but it makes a huge difference because it gives them their palette, their voice, their character, their personality, and how they extract that. At the same time, there are people like Christian Tetzlaff, whom we know at Spivey Hall is a marvelous violinist. He plays chamber music. He's a violin, soloist with major orchestras. He favors this one violin maker, and his instruments have all been made in the last 30 years. And he draws the most incredible sound from them. So it's not just the old instruments, but whatever excites the musician will excite us. That's how that works. It's sort of like the acoustics. If the acoustics are good, everybody wins. If there's real character and some intrinsic personality and some something to hold on to, or something that just captures you in the sound, that is the recipe for an engaging chamber music experience. Tara mentioned her Haynes flutes. Haynes flutes are sort of, I I'm using the wrong term. They're not gold standard, but they're the high standard of professional flutes. They're not the only ones, but I don't know flute players who don't have multiple flutes. They all have multiple flutes because they are affordable, even though they are, it's like parking a car. And if you lose your flute, you've lost a car. That's a very difficult thing. But yes, they have multiple piccolos. Yes, they have wooden flutes. How one finds an instrument is so important too. Ani talked about how she couldn't really afford one, but she found it early. Those instruments come up once in a lifetime sometimes.
Wow.
So if you're there and you have access to this instrument and it can be yours and it's right for you, then that is a life-changing moment if you're a professional musician who needs to rely on a limited supply of very, very fine instruments. The brass players have so much more latitude. The oboists like instruments made principally from France and Germany. The clarinetists also like France and Germany a whole lot. My mother grew up playing a buffet clarinet, and she adored it. And I have that sound in my ears from way, way long ago. Bassoonists want instruments from France and Germany mostly. There's some extraordinarily fine instruments made in Japan now, not just pianos, but flutes and French horns and other things too. But it's very personal. So maybe we should do this. Maybe when we have opportunities to chat with musicians, we should ask them to tell us stories about their instruments, because I'm sure they'll have something to say.
I love that.
I have one. When we were at String Theory in Chattanooga, at dinner that night, I sat next to the mother of the violinist who is married to Dan Phillips. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you ought to get the mother's view of the children and their violins. He played a violin, a Stradivarius, that was loaned to him by the Stradivarius Society. Mm. And she was so upset that the society made him take the violin back to Chicago every several months. I'm sitting there trying to keep a straight face and sympathize with her as all that her dear son had to put up with just to play this violin.
Well, they probably wanted to make sure that it was still around and it hadn't been left in a taxi, and it was,
and that it was tuned properly, and that they would think that maybe her son was not taking proper care. And she also told me, in raising this child, how she would have to tell him to go out and play and forget practicing.
Yes. That is a big issue. You're never done in music. Yeah. You're never done. And even if you have a limited number of performances, there's always ways that you could be doing something else with the music you're making at that level. And if you're trying to get into a conservatory and have a professional career, and you know how few those opportunities are, and there's only so many jobs with major orchestras, there's only so many major teaching positions, if you're a tuba player, it's, unless you're in the military, you have very limited options in the professional music world. So, there are options, but, anyway, yes, raising a very talented young, musician is a gigantic challenge.
And don't want her to play the harp.
And why not? Why not?
Dad. Yes.
Well, I had a harp player friend. I had a harp player friend growing up, and we played the Fantastics in high school as one of our music drama performances, and she was studying with a really, really good harp player at the Eastman School of Music, and she lugged that harp everywhere. She had muscles. She had more muscles than I did. It was hilarious because she knew how to put it in the car. She knew how to reel it around. She knew to lug it through, pull it up steps. She knew how to do everything.
Yeah, my son is almost a teenager now, but when he first started playing the baritone in band about 3 years ago, the bus driver told him either I needed a bigger kid or a smaller instrument. He was as big as he was.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, more stories.
Fun learning, hearing stories that you have, that all of our friends have from, not just Spivey experiences, but other experiences we've had together with artists that we know and love. This is really a wonderful thing for us to get to come and share. And I'm so happy that you were here with us tonight for this. And I really encourage you to join us for more of these. We would love to have more experiences where we get to come together and, share all the stories that we may never have shared before. That's a story that I've never heard Tom tell. And there are a million of these I know we've heard here and there and everywhere. So thank you so much for being here and joining us for these kind of talks.
Okay, and I feel we should say we so value hearing the stories, and we love your participation in this. We have recorded this session, and Tammy is going to be putting it on YouTube and the social media, and she's able to edit it. We didn't ask your permission. We're asking it now. And if you have anything that you feel should not be made public to the rest of the world, you need to let us know. Because
Elise and I were also just discussing that maybe when we're doing personal stories, this will be something that we would share just on the Friends private Facebook page for other donors to be able to share in the experience, but it doesn't go out to the entire world.
So thank you all. It's wonderful to see you, and I'm pleased that people responded well to the music made, and we will hear more next week at this time. And I'm going to go dig out my cassette tape. I know I still have it. I know I was going to give it to Goodwill, but it's in the garage, and I'm going to go listen to Aaron Copland rehearsing Appalachian Spring. And we'll also have the debate next time of is it Appalachian or is it Appalachian? Because in the Northeast, it's Appalachian, but when I got here, and Copland called it Appalachian Spring. And of course, it was a ballet he wrote for Martha Graham. It was called Ballet for Martha, this piece.
It didn't have a name until the end, did it? He didn't have it in mind when he wrote it.
Yeah. And at the same time, we live in an area very close to Appalachia, so who knows? But we'll look for the music is the music, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I hope we'll see you then. Thanks again.
Great, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Elise.
Pleasure.
Of course, nice to see you, everyone.
And thank you to Elise and Tammy for working on a Sunday. We're used to working on Sundays, just not remotely and not in the summer. But everything is Clayton State has banned the use of the word fluid because we're using it too much. We can't say fluid anymore, but our schedules are flexible now. The internet makes that possible. So thank you for your flexibility, and have a good evening. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good